What's up, goobers? It's me, Pugmalion, and today I have a beautiful recipe for you. It's very simple, very delicious. First, you're gonna take some toilet paper and then soak it in water and then just mush it up until it turns into mashed potatoes. Then you get this cup full of gray sludge. Add in a glass of milk and you just blend that all up. I would use a hand mixer you have on hand that you're okay with never using for food again. And with just a few more simple steps, you can turn this toilet paper casserole into a life-size emperor penguin. Want to know the rest of these steps? Then just keep on watching. The first thing I did was draw some templates in Adobe Illustrator, and these drawings will ultimately be cut out onto cardboard. I'm taking two different cross sections of the penguin, one from straight on and one from the side. Well, actually these side profiles, there's going to be a couple of them. You can think of it like taking a few different cross sections of the penguin. The first one right smack in the middle, and then a few more that each progressively get closer to its flippers. It's almost like drawing a topography map but of a penguin. And each of these different cross sections will be spaced by the front profile, which you can see has been sliced up into like slats. And you can see how I'm flipping back and forth between a couple of different pictures that are from a couple of different angles to get the curves of each of these pieces correct. And then because this canvas was like 50 inches wide and 30 inches tall, like, you know, the size of a life-size emperor penguin, I had to slice up every shape so that they could be cut out by my Cricut machine, and its mat is only 1 foot by 1 foot, so needed to do some reshaping. And you can see that each of these smaller shapes have letters and numbers on them, and this will just help reassemble all the pieces when I'm actually tracing stuff onto cardboard. And these are all of the pieces. I used like 50 sheets of cardstock, and you can see the pile of excess paper on my chair. And yes, it is an unusual chair, I'm aware, but I always sit cross-legged, so I just don't vibe with office chairs that have arms. And honestly, on principle, I just kind of avoid chairs, and especially when I'm working with a ginormous piece of cardboard like I am now, just easier to sit on the floor. You can see how now I'm recombobulating all of the smaller pieces together to reassemble them into the big shapes that I had drawn on Illustrator, and I'm tracing the outline of these big shapes. All of these big shapes except for the middle one, I will be cutting out 2 of them. This is due to the simple fact that penguins have 2 sides, unless you're making like a relief of a penguin. For the thin pieces that were like the front cross section of the penguin, I taped those subsections together so that I could get a more refined outline of the shapes, but the precision didn't matter because I did not cut these shapes precisely, so I could have saved some tape. And you can see now I'm cutting out all of the shapes. And don't worry, I removed all of the small creatures that were scuttling about earlier because I didn't want to stab them with a box cutter. And to cut up all of this cardboard, I had to do some like gymnastics because the cardboard needed to be pretty taut to actually properly cut through it. So I was pinning it down with like my legs or my knees or my feet, or just sitting on it and like holding it tight with one hand while I carved it up into the likeness of a penguin. It was like I was wrestling with it, but since I had a knife, I won. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't think that box cutters were gonna work this well. Like, I know they're called box cutters, and my goal was to cut boxes, but I was like, okay, well, if this doesn't work, I'll just like get out my rotary tool, I guess. I don't know, I'll use kitchen scissors if it's that bad. But no, the box cutters cut the boxes. It's crazy how that works. Tools that are designed for a specific task are good at that specific task. But like I said before, they did not really perform the task precisely, like all of the lines are all wobbly. This was mostly annoying when I was taking these cutout pieces to trace their sister piece. So those pieces ended up kind of being different sizes. That was suboptimal. So now that we're actually at the assembly stage, I hope things are starting to make more sense, like the way that the bigger pieces and the smaller strips are fitting together. I hot glued the small strips down the middle of the big pieces, and then the other side I glued on another big piece to make kind of like a sandwich. And this ended up being like a quintuple decker sandwich. And this was all to just make the torso. The appendages and stuff were going to be added separately later. I marked a number on each of the pieces and also a line for where the bigger pieces would connect with the smaller spacer pieces. And here's a little spoiler. I didn't end up using quite a few of these pieces. I think piece 2 and 3, I didn't use those because I wildly overestimated how wide penguins actually were. Here I was thinking, penguins are just so fat, so I gotta make sure there's a lot of good pieces for them. But don't worry, my cats have been playing with the tossed aside cardboard for several days now, so it wasn't a total waste. What I didn't show you is how many times I had to rip each of the pieces off and then glue them back on to make sure that they were totally even and symmetrical with the same sized and spaced out piece on the other side. Luckily that was pretty easy since you can just rip hot glue off of anything, especially something smooth like cardboard. But even though you can rip apart hot glue pretty easily, this whole structure was quite strong, actually. Like, this penguin tipped over probably a dozen times while I was trying to add the feet and figure out how to make it stand upright. No structural damage. Like, I'm not saying to go out and build a couch with cardboard and hot glue, but it could work if you're light enough, I guess. Maybe if you're like a toddler. Okay, maybe not because toddlers shouldn't touch hot glue, but yeah. Once I got the whole creature standing and everything, I started bridging all of the gaps between the big pieces of cardboard with some painter's tape. You could argue that you should use masking tape in this situation because it is stickier, at least marginally stickier, but I've found that when I've made paper mache with masking tape, like, when you pull the tape off of the roll, it sticks on your skin a lot, and then as you peel the tape off of your finger, it keeps on pulling at your skin, and it just hurts pretty badly after a while. So while the painter's tape still did pull at my skin, it wasn't as bad as I remember when I've done a similar sort of thing with masking tape. And even if the pieces kind of stuck up a little bit, it wasn't that big of a deal because they were just going to be smushed down with the toilet paper sludge eventually anyway. And like, worst case, you could hot glue it down, so whatever. Well, okay, honestly, I just chose it because it was blue and I thought that would look cool, and it did, so you're welcome. What the penguin was actually standing on was pieces of a ruler, and each of the legs had 2 pieces in it, so it was kind of on 4 legs almost, or it was kind of on like 4 support skewers. I don't think much of the weight was on the tail at all, even though it was on the ground, and I expected it to be kind of like the 3rd leg of a tripod or something, but the weight was leaning more forward than it was backwards towards the tail, and I think this was because when I added in all of the spacers between the big pieces, it was aligned more towards the back of the penguin than the front, so the weight tipped more towards the front, which was unfortunate, but that's just how it is. And this is why you make a smaller model first and you don't just start off with a really big one. I don't know why I didn't do that. I really don't. It was probably a bad call on my part, but the penguin stands. That's all that matters. But while I was painting it and taping it and like putting on the paper mache, I did have it propped against something just because while I was pushing it around, obviously the support wasn't quite as strong. I didn't want it to just like fall over while I was trying to delicately paint a black stripe on its neck, you know? And then to make the head, I just taped down a lot of wads of toilet paper. I just gradually added more pieces that I taped down until I was like, yep, that's a penguin head. You know, you always see those bumper stickers and it's like, what would Jesus do? You know what Jesus does? He turns one thing into a completely different thing. And that's why I turned toilet paper into a penguin. You're welcome. Amen. And I also added this little scrap of cardboard to act as like a temporary beak, because it's just hard to figure out the proportions of something when that would be like trying to draw the palm of a hand without any of the fingers. It just doesn't work. But like many temporary solutions to problems, it became permanent. And that cardboard just became the base of the beak. And then to make this beak, I used Scotch tape because I kind of ran out of the painter's tape. And that was just objectively worse for this in every conceivable way because it's less sticky, it's less flexible. But ultimately, the beak was made. The penguin has a beak that looks like a penguin's beak, and that's all that matters. So now with everything except for the flippers in place, I was able to start slapping on the toilet paper glue. The first 10 or so seconds, I did try to put it on with one of those like drywall smoothing scraper things, but I just started using my hands pretty much immediately. I don't know, I think if you can use your hands for something instead of a tool, why not? I like finger painting because you get to touch the paint, but I didn't get to touch this because I was wearing gloves, so paper mache is definitely interesting. I remember in school I was in an engineering lab class, and in my group project I was in charge of making like the outer shell of our robot, and I was like, I know exactly what I'm gonna do. And I was like, no. Came to class, I brought some flour, I brought a bunch of newspapers, I brought some balloons, and I started making a paper mache boat. And the TA came over and was like, this is very creative in like a derogatory way. What you were supposed to do was go to the machine shop and then like laser cut acrylic, make like an acrylic box or something. And when we were getting it graded, so the robot we were making was like a weather monitoring device, and then the TA who was grading everything was like, so is this boat thing, is it weatherproof? Since this is a weather monitoring device, is it like waterproof? And I was like, well, it's a boat, so inherently it's weatherproof. And we got a B+. So yep, that's paper mache for you. I don't do well with group projects. I just don't do well with school. It's just not my thing. Here I'm putting on the flippers. I keep on leaving the frame and then coming back in because I'm walking across the room to get a look at the whole penguin with his flipper on. And then I just walk back over to make any adjustments that are needed and just do that back and forth until I'm like, yeah, that's a flipper. That's the flipper of a penguin, all right. And then I cut out the other flipper out of just another scrap of cardboard and I put on the flippers. When I was trying to get this guy to stand, I really couldn't get it to be perfectly upright and rigid, so he's kind of fallen over a little bit. He's got some Leaning Tower of Pisa stuff going on, but I was like, okay, I could spend 3 hours to get this guy to stand evenly, or I could just integrate his lopsidedness into the pose. Like if you raise your hand or something, part of your body falls over a little bit. And I was like, that sounds easier. So I chose to do that instead, and I have his right flipper kind of sticking up a little bit. Originally I was just going to stick it all the way up, but then I had it like that for a split second, which you might have caught. But when I was looking at him with his flipper up, I was like, this is a little too reminiscent of certain people from the 1940s, and this should be a politically neutral penguin, so I made his flipper just a little bit up. He's a nice penguin, okay? None of that extremism stuff in this igloo. So I put on another layer of the toilet paper gumbo, and this was to add a little bit more strength and also to blend in the flippers with the rest of the body and patch anything up that I missed. And before I put the paint on, I let the penguin dry for about 36 hours. This was because in the toilet paper potion, there was also a little bit of flour in it to thicken it, and if you don't let this dry all the way, it can start molding, and I didn't want my penguin to mold, because that would be disgusting. So when I painted everything, the first thing I did was that I outlined where the black was going to stop and then the white was going to begin, or the yellow patch was going to be, and then I dabbed everything on with a sponge. When I went to go buy this acrylic paint, I also bought sponge brushes, like those foam brushes, but they were nowhere in my house, and I was like, I'll just use this sponge. So I had put on my paint pants expecting to get a lot of paint all over me because I was painting something very large, and I do tend to get paint all over me. I really have no idea how. It's just every time I paint, it's just on my legs. I did get paint all over me, as I expected, as I tend to do, but I don't think I actually got any paint on my clothes. I mean, better safe than sorry, but I guess I kind of jumped the gun on the paint pants. The important thing is that I didn't get any paint on the dog. And that's important because if she got paint on her, she would lick it off and she would eat paint. She doesn't need to eat paint. She needs all the IQ points she can get. She doesn't have any to spare. So I'm gonna be honest, like, when I was painting this penguin, I was like, I mean, it looks like a penguin. You can look at this and be like, yep, that's a penguin, I guess. Until I added the yellow patches around its neck, and then I was like, oh man, that's a penguin, but like in a good way. And it is. We can all agree that this is a life-size penguin that was made out of toilet paper. Yeah, so you might be wondering, now that I have finished this beautiful and majestic, yet size-wise unwieldy piece of art, what am I gonna do with it? And I think the answer should be obvious. I'm putting it in my guest bathroom so it can look at everyone while they're on the toilet. And he's also holding this nice no pee or poo, be respectful sign. So if you like penguins, like. If you don't like penguins, that's kind of a you problem, so you can leave. Okay, bye.